Next, we are bringing to the stage Sonya Kahlenberg. Sonya is a Harvard-trained primate behavioral biologist who spent 11 years studying chimps in the wild. Currently, she is serving as the executive director of GRACE, the Gorilla Rehabilitation and Conservation Education Center in Uganda, in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And she's going to tell us about why this is really her passion in life and has really been, as a great ape conservationist for a couple of decades now, why this is so important to her. Welcome, Sonya.
Hi, thank you. I just want to say thank you to Ron and Scott and Stephanie for inviting me. I've had a great time and learned so much in the past couple days. And I also want to thank the Detroit Zoo, who is a major partner of ours. And actually, they've been working with us for the past 2 years and have done great things with us so far. I'm very much looking forward to what we're going to do together in the coming year as well. So today I just wanted to tell you a little bit about the situation going on in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo with Grauer's gorillas. I wanted to discuss what our organization, which I'm just going to say GRACE because it's easier than the whole title, what GRACE is doing to help with the orphan gorilla situation and how our work is feeding into the overall conservation efforts in Eastern DRC for gorillas and chimpanzees. So as you may know, there are 4 subspecies of gorillas. The eastern gorillas are here, and the mountain gorillas, which most of you have heard about, I'm sure, live in 3 countries, in Uganda, Rwanda, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. And Grauer's gorillas only live in the Democratic Republic of Congo here, and importantly, only in the eastern provinces. So mountain gorillas are actually one of the nice case studies of a conservation success story. So this is data from the Dian Fossey Gorilla Fund International looking at their census data over time. So in the 1970s, you might have heard about the crisis that the mountain gorillas were facing, down to 250 animals, and largely in part of the extreme conservation efforts of the Fossey Fund and others working with them, that number has increased over time. And worldwide now there's 880 mountain gorillas. What has also helped with this is the fact that people pay $750 to go see mountain gorillas for 1 hour. And the tourism is the #1 foreign revenue for the country of Rwanda. So Rwandans are very motivated for conservation, and especially gorilla conservation. So Grauer's gorillas are closely related to mountain gorillas, but the situation with conservation is very different. And I would say it's even a conservation failure at this point. I hope it's going to get better, but here's what's been going on. So in the 1960s, when the last real survey was done, there were 17,000 Grauer's gorillas in Eastern DRC. No one has really been able to get in and do good censuses since then. The data that people are trying to put together now show that in the 1990s, that number was between, the range is like 2,000, the best case is 10,000 gorillas left. And now the censuses are starting again, and the number is definitely, the maximum is around 5,000, and probably it could even be as low as 2,000. We're still trying to work out the numbers. The Grauer's gorillas is the only subspecies of gorilla that is not listed as critically endangered on the IUCN Red List, and that is largely because we don't have data to show this population decline because it's still being collected. And the reason we don't have good data is because this has been a very difficult area to work in the past few decades because it's been embroiled in war and insecurity. So I can't really summarize what's been going on in Eastern Congo in a few minutes, but basically, after the Rwandan genocide, there was hundreds of thousands of people spilled over to seek refuge in the Eastern DRC. And conflict was then created within DRC and started off their own civil war. And that has been ongoing, and 5 million people have died in the conflict, which is the highest death count since World War II. And most people don't even know that this has been going on. But you might hear some headlines every now and again. But the peace accord was signed in 2003, but in the eastern provinces, again, where the Grauer's gorillas live, the only place that they live, Even though there's been a peace accord signed in the eastern provinces, the violence continues. So this is a map showing lots of different things, but here is area controlled by the rebels in eastern DRC. This is area with strong rebel influence. You see here in red, these are attacks recently. Again, 2003 was a peace accord. Between 2009 and 2010 of attacks on humanitarian organizations. So, and then here are internally displaced people. So this is showing the scale there. So the big ones are 325,000 people living in these areas. In the background, what you see is Virunga National Park. This is Africa's first national park. Here is one of these IDP, internally displaced peoples, camp right outside Virunga. And people living there have needs, and they are meeting these needs by going into the park and getting the resources that they need to boil water and other things. You might have heard this was a National Geographic photo from a few years ago. So one thing that's been happening with the rebel groups is they have been exploiting natural resources in order to fuel their activities. So they have been involved with the illegal charcoal trade, for example, within Virunga National Park. Virunga National Park was pushing back, and so they retaliated by killing some of the mountain gorillas that live within Virunga. So this is coltan, which maybe you've heard about before. This is something that is used in electronics. Many of you at zoos probably have a electronic recycling program. I don't know why this keeps going. So coltan is, when the cell phone sort of boom hit in the 1990s, the demand for coltan spiked incredibly. And a blessing and a curse, the DRC has a lot of minerals. And what happened is during this insecurity, the rebels then took over a lot of the, illegally took over a lot of the mines and were enslaving people to work for them in order to fuel their activities. So coltan mining increased, and in order to, so here you see all the coltan mines here. So Kahuzi-Biega National Park is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and a lot of coltan exists there, and rebels moved in, and in order to feed the people who they were enslaving to mine for them, they killed the gorillas to feed to them. So 50% of the gorilla population in Kahuzi-Biega, again, our World Heritage Site, died in a year, and including 88% of the habituated gorillas, because this used to be a tourist population. So the habituated gorillas were the easiest to kill because they were used to people. Maybe some of you have seen Virunga. If not, it's on Netflix, so I encourage you to take a look at the film. It's a documentary that just came out on November 7th. So this tells the story about Virunga National Park and the ongoing battle they're having with SOCO, which is a British oil company that is trying to obtain rights to drill within the park. But as a result of these conservation failures, we end up with a population of orphan gorillas. I'm going to skip that for a second. So since 2003, 19 Grauer's gorillas have been confiscated by the wildlife authorities. I just wanted to show a little clip because I agree with Chris Draper. It's really important to understand the individual suffering that is going on with these things. I'm going to speed through it a little bit and start about here. So this is one of the gorillas that we currently care for, and this is how we came to know her. Her name is Amani, which interestingly means peace. And this was a sting operation that the ICC and the Wildlife Authority in Congo set up for someone who was selling a gorilla. So it's a sting operation. They're posing as wildlife traders, and he comes to the Goma airport to sell the gorilla to these wildlife traders. So
for the last 3 months, we've been running an undercover operation on a trafficking ring in an endangered species. I've been posing as a wildlife trader, and today one of them has just taken a plane from a town called Walikale, west from here, and is bringing me a baby gorilla. Right now we have rangers on standby, and we will be making arrests.
Poste.
Il bouge. Ok, il a envie, mais c'est chaud.
So that's Imani. So just an infographic showing that, one gorilla that is confiscated, at least 2 adults are lost. So you can really think of 15 gorillas for every 1 gorilla that we end up confiscating. So the 19 gorillas that have been confiscated in the past few years is really around 300. So this is, again, a slow reproducing species, huge impact on the 2,000 to 5,000 gorillas that are left. I'm going to skip that for time. So the gorillas that are confiscated are bycatch from poaching. So bushmeat is a big problem in this area. Also, there is a problem with illegal trafficking of great apes. So maybe some of you have heard about this. This is just showing where these markets are. There was some discussion about the chimps that went to China. So there's some stuff going on in the Middle East, but Asia is one of the big places where illegally trafficked great apes are going. 84% of the Grauer's gorillas that we have confiscated are less than 3 years old, so that's before weaning age. 26% of the ones that the Grauer's gorillas that have been confiscated have died. This is actually a really good statistic because the western lowland gorillas, one sanctuary had 80% of those gorillas die. And something that's really interesting to me is that gorillas seem to be extremely fragile compared to other great apes. So orangutans, bonobos, and chimpanzees seem to be really hardy. Sometimes you'll see, cases of chimpanzees being chained to a car and surviving for years like that. And gorillas really, shortly after they are taken from their mothers, die. So I think it's interesting to think about the psychology differences between those different great apes. So the ones that are confiscated less than a year, around 50% of them are dying. So Grace was built basically as a result of this population of orphan gorillas that was coming about because of the conservation failures. And basically it was set up with a commitment to lifelong care for these individual gorillas, as well as having a goal for rehabilitation for possible reintroduction if it's ever possible. It was put in a very remote place. So it's built on 370 acres within a big forested area in natural Grauer's gorilla habitat. So up in the mountains overlooking sort of where the Albertine Rift meets the Congo Basin is where we're at. And it's right outside the Taina Nature Reserve, which is a priority population for the remaining Grauer's gorillas in the world. So this is showing the range of Grauer's gorillas, including the red boxes are basically survey data where they're present. So Taina is up here, and we don't have a recent survey, so we don't know exactly how many there are, but between Taina and the adjacent areas, there's probably between 500 to 800 gorillas there, so it's a priority population, obviously. Grace was built on land that is community land. So the Taina Nature Reserve was the first community-managed reserve in the DRC. So this community decided, which actually to me is really remarkable, that at the end of this war time, when this community had suffered some of the worst atrocities of the war, including the sexual violence against women that you hear about from Eastern DRC. So a lot of this was going on in this community, and at the same time, they decided to set aside 220,000 acres of their ancestral land for conservation. And they invited Grace to come and donated the land for Grace to be built. So this is the regional king laying the cornerstone of the Grace building. The first gorillas arrived in 2010, and 2011 was the next one. So these were the orphans that were being kept in various places. So they all coming to Grace to live out the rest of their lives. We now have 13 gorillas. I really appreciated the framework of the happy, healthy, natural for welfare, because it's something I think that will help us as we try to think about what to do for these gorillas. Our approach has been sort of thinking on the natural end of things, I guess. So basically, we follow IUCN guidelines for orphan great apes. When they first come in, again, these are unweaned infants and need formula and everything. They go through a quarantine period before going in with the group. So they're paired with a human caregiver, but as soon as possible, they go into a group of gorillas. So these are all orphan gorillas together. This is the age distribution of what we have at Grace. So basically we have a lot of young ones and then some older females. And so what's nice about that is that the older females in every single case have adopted the young ones coming in as sort of their surrogate offspring. And we work with the gorillas in totally protected contact after they go into the group. And one thing that's really interesting to us and we want to quantify is they really want nothing to do with humans once they get into the gorilla group. They're not very human-oriented at all. We also do health monitoring. We feed them a 90% natural diet, so we are now provisioning them with vegetation that we collect, so over 300 kilograms are collected each day by our staff for the gorillas. We have just spent the past 3 years building a 24-acre forest enclosure, so here's our current outdoor facility. This is what we're opening up in January. And again, it's their natural habitat there. We work very closely with zoos, so this is Beth Schaefer from the Houston Zoo, who's come out and helped work with our caregivers on how to care for gorillas. Here's Keith from the Dallas Zoo, and Disney has also been extremely involved with the project, both on training our staff to research, to build the facility, lots of different things. So right now we're in the process of setting up our scientific program. So we have, over the past few months, started behavioral monitoring to be able to quantify these welfare measures that we want to do, as well as to understand how are they doing in their new forest enclosure, and then to start making informed decisions about reintroduction. So we're doing behavioral monitoring as well as stress hormone monitoring. We've done personality data collection. Interestingly, what are some of the outcomes? One thing that I can say, we don't have a lot of data, any data yet really, but we don't have regurgitation and reingestion in our gorillas, which is something that 50% of the gorillas in zoos do, and it's something that the zoo population is trying to work with. So I think that's interesting and maybe something that we can work with zoos to learn from each other. Is it due to their almost complete natural diet? Maybe, I don't know. Are they happy? I only have anecdotes, but just a quick story. So Muisa is here. She is a Grauer's gorilla that was taken into Rwanda after her capture because they thought she was a mountain gorilla. She spent 3 years by herself because there was no other gorillas over there. And Rwanda and DRC do not get along. And it took us 3 years to get the permits to move her back to DRC. So she was by herself, and then last May, the UN helped us helicopter her to our remote area. And again, she hadn't seen gorillas since she was stolen from her mom at the age of 1. And we opened the doors, and the first thing that happened is the group embraced her, and she embraced them. So are they happy? Yes, I think so. The data will tell us we do that. But interestingly, she's 4 years old and half the size of some of the bigger females, but still wants to ride around on them. It's interesting to think about, she didn't have that when she was younger because her mom was taken away from her very early. So we also have a very strong community support. And I just want to mention this because it's really important because there's been discussion of China here. So even though they're at our sanctuary, they're not exactly safe. So last year we had a really worrying situation where we got a letter from the Congolese Wildlife Authority that said, prepare for gorillas because we're coming to get them to take them away. And we didn't really know what was happening or where they were supposed to be going. And there was discussion from the China talk about, we work with permission from the Congolese government. So for us to stand up against them is very difficult because they can just say leave and that's the end of it. So we said, sure, we want to talk to you, let's discuss and figure out what's going on. In the meantime, we're working with Jane Goodall and trying to get people involved on a higher level to help stop whatever was going to happen. And it turns out now sort of intelligence that has been done has kind of showed that there was some sort of deal to take these gorillas and perhaps send them illegally to China. So I was in a meeting and I got this message saying they're on their way. So I was freaking out because I was in the US and I was calling my team and we knew that they were on their way to come pick up the gorillas. And the community found out about this and got really upset and started rioting, including they destroyed a bridge. They got on the national radio and said, you cannot come and take our gorillas. And and so the ICCN, the Congolese authority, was very frightened and couldn't go into this area. Again, this is community managed land, it's not under their jurisdiction. And the next morning, my director went out and looked outside, and the people had come from church and formed a circle around the gorilla yard and were praying for the gorillas and for their protection. So the community is very committed to conservation, but it's also important to know that we're the only NGO working in this part of Eastern DRC. And so their development is tied to, they see it as tied to our project. And so they're also supportive of our project because of what we can do for them. So the Conservation Action Plan for Growers Gorillas has been going on, which is a bunch of different organizations working together to conserve the growers gorillas. And we are sort of working on this part of it, the care for the gorilla orphans. And because we're in this priority population area, we also have a big role to play in protecting that area. And I'll go through this a little bit quickly, but basically caring for orphans, I think, has massive impact on gorilla conservation. And the first part is what was mentioned earlier. Actually, I had the same idea. You know, this shows one thing, but this shows a totally different thing. And I think it's really important to put the individual stories into this. First of all, most people don't even know what a growers gorilla is, haven't heard of it. And so putting the individual stories of what these individuals have gone through and what they're like and what their group is like has been, I think, has really amazing potential for conservation, for telling that story and making them ambassadors for their subspecies and for the area as well, because they're the only great ape endemic to Eastern DRC. This story was told on Facebook. We had 100,000 views on this story. It was shared all over the place on this photo. So people can really connect with these individual stories, and it's extremely important. Sadly, just a couple weeks ago, we had an unexpected death of one of our gorillas. He died from a stroke. And we put this out on social media and press releases, and it was really amazing to me the responses that people had. I mean, this is just one page. We have pages and pages of responses to this. So people really connect with those stories. In terms of law enforcement, if you don't have a place for orphaned gorillas to go, the laws aren't going to be enforced, because if they have no place to care for them, you know, they're not going to enforce the laws. I mean, law enforcement has major issues still, but you at least need the place to set them to begin. Reintroduction is something that is definitely a goal for us. Now, we have major challenges with security. So security is the biggest thing. Habitat is there because a lot of things have been hunted out of the habitat. But security is the issue. There's one population called Mount Cherribu, which is in Virunga National Park. It's in the extreme north, very isolated population of growers gorillas. So there's mountain and growers gorillas in Virunga. And so this is Gorilla Doctors, one of our close partners. So they work in that population, are monitoring the health there, doing the genetics to see if they're too isolated to be put together with other growers gorillas. But basically the idea is perhaps we could supplement this population with some of the genetics from the gorillas at Grace. This population is going to go extinct. There are 7 individuals in this population. So it's a critical situation for this small population. But there are many welfare concerns and issues that we need to work through. And like I said, we're a new project. We haven't wrapped our heads around any of this stuff. And I encourage anyone who wants to help just to let me know, because we want to collaborate. It's a huge project we're trying to do. You know, how do we break up the group? Are we going to do that? The best mothers who take in the infants, do we keep them there so they can continue to be good mothers to the ones coming in? Do we keep them back? You know, what are the potential dangers in a new group? There was a recent case of a reintroduced group in Gabon where 5 of the gorillas were killed or got sick, it's kind of unclear, by a wild gorilla. Potential dangers to the new group, introducing disease that maybe our gorillas have to another. We have to do very careful health monitoring. How do we remotely monitor health and well-being after reintroduction? Again, this is protected contact that we're managing them. We cannot follow them on foot, so we're going to have to figure out if we are going to be using radio collars or drones and how we're going to do that. In terms of protecting taina, as I said, we're the only NGO working in the area, and the CE in Grace is conservation education. So we work in both local education. We are now setting up a visitors program. which is very important because people live around gorillas, but they've never seen a gorilla, unless it was in the market or something for bushmeat. So people haven't seen a live gorilla, and so what we want to do is, and we're in the process of setting up a program where local people can come, view gorillas in that forested habitat, and learn about gorillas there. And we know from other sanctuaries that this actually has a big effect. This is the bonobo sanctuary in Kinshasa in DRC. So looking at kids when they come, asking them, are bonobos interesting before their visit and then after their visit? These are first-time visitors. And then the kids who have been there before find them interesting still later on. So that's kind of the direction we want to go in. Also, you see this road here. It's a very bad road. And you look at the threats to Grauer's gorillas have been modeled. This area is the highest threat. It goes right down between Taina, which is here, and Virunga National Park here. This road goes Beni Butembo down into this area. And this area at the bottom is where all the orphans are coming from. So what we want to do now, and we're looking for funding for this, is to set up a billboard campaign on this road. And this is also a major trade route coming from Uganda and down into Goma. So hundreds of thousands of people are traveling this route. And so we know we are working with the Jane Goodall Institute, which is one of our partners with the Conservation Action Plan. And they've done similar campaigns in Congo Republic that we are going to be able to take a template of that and learn from, as well as do evaluations like they do. So this is just asking people in Congo Republic, who did you know that apes were threatened before and after the billboard campaign was started. So that's something, a regional education that we want to be getting into in this coming year. We also work with the communities on problem solving, because if you don't have an alternative solution for what people are doing and how they're impacting the habitat, then it's kind of pointless. So people are committed to conservation, but it doesn't mean there still aren't issues. We know, for example, that as late as 2013, chimps and gorillas in Taina have been killed. And so bushmeat is a big problem there. We have worked on some alternative protein projects, as was mentioned with the cane rats, although we haven't done the cane rat example. We work with free-ranging chickens and guinea pigs as an alternative protein source. We've also, a major issue is hygiene in the area, so there's no latrines or anything, including in big public places like markets. So we work with radio, because the only written thing there is the Bible. There's no newspapers or any way to get word out there, and most people can't read anyways. So we work with the radio, because a lot of people have access to radios, on campaigns for promoting good hygiene, building latrines, things like that. So we have these programs that we're starting. We have a ton of partners, a lot of them zoos. So right now, about 60% of our funding comes from zoos, so they're a major source. And actually, Disney was one of the founders of this whole project. So thank you to all of our partners for everything they do for us. And yeah, follow us on social media and our website. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sonya.